Good afternoon. My name is Tyler Young. I'm the founder and CEO of Anfu Financial Technology. Today, from Washington, D.C., I'm pleased to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Henry Cassidy. Dr. Cassidy is currently the chief consultant at IFE Group, which is also the parent company of Anfu Financial Technology. He was previously an SVP at Freddie Mac and a professor at Virginia Tech. Henry is well recognized by top executives in the mortgage industry as one of the best financial innovators. He has over 40 years of experience supervising a wide range of business functions, from very hands-on oriented, detailed business processes such as model development and system deployment, data and documentation validation and maintenance, loan quality control, legal and regulatory compliance, up to the highest level of board of director policy establishment and enforcement. He was trained as a mathematician and an economist. He received his PhD of economics from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He has published textbooks in econometrics and many other research papers in top academic journals, such as Journal of Political Economy. Henry was able to combine his strong technical background and extensive business management experience to develop numerous financial innovations, 3 of which has been patented in the US. Many others are still currently used by the industry as the best practice. For example, RAMIC, synthetic securitization, and the loan prospector, which he will share with us today of his experience in developing and operating it. Now, without further ado, please join me to welcome Dr. Henry Cassidy. Henry?
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you for making this symposium possible. In January 1995, Freddie Mac launched Loan Prospector, which revolutionized getting a home mortgage in America. We were the first to market by almost a year. I had the honor of hiring staff and leading them in developing the scorecard that made it possible for Loan Prospector to automatically and speedily make decisions as to whether the loan applicants were creditworthy. It was the most exciting time of my career. The initial goals of Loan Prospector were the following. First was to reduce the high-risk loans to achieve a high-quality portfolio, and do it by adversely selecting the competition, which was Fannie Mae at the time. Reduce the cost and time of mortgage origination, which applicants will like it, and so would loan originators like it. Wanted a short implementation time to be the first in market. This slide shows the organizational support for Loan Prospector. The president was a PhD economist and had a focus on credit risk, and he viewed Loan Prospector as a competitive advantage. Freddie Mac became a private company in 1986. As an aside, I was then Vice President of Corporate Finance, and I managed our initial public offering, another fun thing to do. As a result, he was able to select the board of directors, and he became chairman of the board of directors. And they were handpicked to make sure that they had managing credit risk as a high priority. So Loan Prospector had support throughout the entire organization, especially IT department and the legal departments. My boss, the VP of Credit Risk Management hired me from corporate finance 2 years prior to the development of Loan Prospector. So I was very familiar with manual underwriting and the risks they posed to Freddie Mac. I managed the mortgage credit policy department, and once we decided to launch Loan Prospector, I managed and hired and managed the scorecard development team, as well as the home value estimator team, which is now called Home Value Advisor, which estimates prices for houses automatically. The scorecard development team was composed of 10 quantitative economists, and the home value estimator team was 3 quants, we call them. Once it was developed, the number is 6 quants that could do the updating of the Loan Prospector scorecard. Also manage the policies of both of these functions. I spent 1 full year heading up this department and delegated the mortgage credit policy duties to my subordinates. It was really a fun year. Now I'm going to talk about how automated underwriting transformed the processes used to manually underwrite loans. First is determine borrower creditworthiness. There are hundreds of decision makers in the manual underwriting world that make subjective decisions about the creditworthiness of an applicant without the benefits of performance data. For Loan Prospector, there's one decision maker, that is the scorecard that's in Loan Prospector. It's based on loan performance. So it eliminates the underwriting errors that might be produced by subjective evaluations of some underwriters. Also, it saves costs for originators. Next, we'll look at creditworthiness. And for manual underwriters had to evaluate pages upon pages of credit reports for each borrower, which Loan Prospector provided the score almost instantaneously without having to have the time spent by the underwriters looking through the credit reports. Next, we'll talk about valuation. There, thousands of appraisers and subjective selection of comparable sales that they made is the standard way to do it. Home Value Advisor assisted spotting overvaluations, which is a check on the appraiser's evaluation and process. Next, we'll talk about inspection by appraisers, which required full on-site internal and external inspection of the property. If in fact the Loan Prospector decided it was a low-risk applicant, drive-by inspections were allowed, which is faster and lower cost for the appraiser, and it's faster by days. In terms of income, asset, and down payment fund documentation, there is verification of recent history. And for Loan Prospector, it's the same because there the risk is in preventing fraud. So documentation of these things needed to be the same for both Loan Prospector and manual underwriting. For trading off underwriting factors, manual underwriters had to have subjective evaluations of what are called compensating factors. So if you have a high LTV, loan-to-value ratio, which is high risk, good credit history may compensate for that, again on a subjective basis. The equation in Loan Prospector provided automatic trade-offs of factors so that these were evaluated the same no matter who the applicant was. The time to determine creditworthiness took days, now took 2 minutes. The consequences for the market is that originators were subjected to repurchase risk. That is, the loan could be put back to them at any time during the loan's life if the originator made errors in judgment or in documentation. Loan prospector, if they got an accept decision from it, would relieve them of that repurchase risk. It was automatically considered, or applicant was automatically considered creditworthy. The effect of having repurchase risk means that marginal borrowers may be denied because they don't want to take a chance on having the loan put back to them later on. It's not the case for accept loans from Loan Prospector. There's better fair lending results as a result. Lowers disparate impacts on minorities because they are more likely to have more marginal borrowers relative to the majority. Now I'd like to share some issues that the Loan Prospector development team faced. The scorecard is a mathematical equation that relates the probability of default of the mortgage to the underlying factors that predict the probability of default, such as borrowers' credit scores. The equation predicts the probability of default for each applicant, which becomes their Loan Prospector score or their AUS score. Cutoff is the AUS score, the Loan Prospector score, above which the predicted probability of default is deemed low enough to call the loan an accept loan. So that's the background. Now, first question is, if not accept, should we reject or refer these highest risk loans? Refer allows the loan to be manually underwritten, and this is consumer friendly. Reject means that the loan is ineligible, which is not consumer friendly. We chose to refer the non-accepts. Setting the cutoff, which is the point at which you're either above it or below it, that is an accept or a refer. The tighter the cutoff, the better performing the loans that you do receive are, but the market share shrinks. This decision was approved by the marketing department and upper management. A large and important task is to assemble the initial estimation data set, which is used to define the scorecard equation. You need to assemble historical data for loan outcomes and the associated explanatory variables in order to estimate the logit equation, as we call it. We needed to purchase FICO scores, that is credit scores, from the archives of the credit bureaus, and in order to estimate the scorecard. And we needed to get Freddie Mac's legal department to determine how to comply with privacy laws in order to access those archives for the loans that are on our books, which constitute the estimation database. We also had to choose what is a bad loan. There are extremes to think about. One is that just 90 days delinquent in the first 2 years, for example, would be at one end of the spectrum to choose. At the other end would be actual losses observed, say in the first 4 years. And you can take any kind of intermediate type of performance to also pick your definition of a bad loan. Again, upper management was involved in this decision, and the decision has changed over the years as Loan Prospector was improved from one version to the next. Now I'd like to talk about the trends in automated underwriting over the last 10 years. And I'll try to explain them in a non-technical way. These were developed by IFE Group over the last 10 years, and you see it as necessary improvements to make scorecards perform better. Mortgage scorecards typically include what are called control variables. They're to estimate what is called the logit equation, but are excluded from the scorecard. So the scorecard is Loan Prospector's algorithm to determine acceptance. Let's say, give you an example of a control variable. Let's think about the location of the house as a control variable. For policy reasons, you do not want to use it as a scorecard variable. because we want to treat all Americans the same no matter where they live. But including it in the logit equation, while estimating it, can represent local economy and hold the local economy constant in some way to get a better scorecard. Technically included in the equation, but not in the scorecard. It improves technically the unbiasedness of the scorecard coefficients and it makes the scorecard more robust. So we also looked at how to test the robustness of the scorecard. I want to make sure that the scorecard will work well across different future environments, performs well and has stable coefficients. Because we do not know what the near-term environment will look like. And we need to implement a single scorecard, come what may, with the environment. We have developed these tests and use them in developing scorecards. Prepayments are an issue for scorecard developers. A prepayment is the payoff of the mortgage by the borrower. Prepayments do is censure the observation of potentially bad loans. If in fact they had not prepaid, they might have eventually gone into default. This is not observed. So the problem is, if you count prepayments as good loans, well, you didn't lose any money, so why wouldn't you count them as good loans? The predictive power of the scorecard will be diluted because some of them would have gone to default if you had been able to observe their performance. We have developed methods to deal with such censoring. Also, we want to make sure in the United States that we comply with fair lending laws. And first of all, disparate impacts on minorities are allowed by the fair lending laws. But what we have to do to technically get quantification for compliance is to look for a less discriminatory alternative scorecard. We have developed an approach that leads to quantitatively demonstrate whether there exists a less discriminating alternative scorecard or not. An important thing to do in a scorecard is to measure how good it performs. What we have done is not use the standard measurements because we think they miss the point. What we have done is measure the effectiveness at the cutoff point, where the decision is made to be accept or not accept, in our case refers. We look at the percentage of bads below the cut point and the percentage of goods below the cut point, and make sure that the difference in those two is large enough to rely upon. I'm going to conclude by saying that if you set out to automate the underwriting of loans, you'll find it challenging but very rewarding if the underwriting decision tool is effective in identifying the riskier loans. You get greater assurance then that the loan will perform as promised if it's an accept loan. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today, and good luck to all of you.